The envelope was so light I thought it was empty. My mother slid it across the dinner table with a smile that was meant to look tender and landed somewhere closer to triumphant. Across the room, my father stood in the open doorway to the patio with one hand on my brother Tyler's shoulder like he was presenting a champion to a crowd. Outside, under the glow of string lights, a blue SUV sat in the driveway with a red bow stretched across the hood so wide it looked ridiculous. My Aunt Denise already had her phone out, my grandmother was dabbing at the corners of her eyes, Uncle Vic was grinning into his drink before the punchline had even finished arriving. "Go ahead, Nora," my father said. "Open yours, not gift, not card, yours." Tyler lifted the key fob and clicked it just to hear the chirp from the driveway. Everybody turned to look. My mother laughed softly, proud of herself. My father raised his glass and said, 31 years old and finally driving something worthy of him. They all cheered for Tyler first, then my father looked at me and said, loud enough for the whole table, "And for Nora we figured cash is more her speed, she's practical, doesn't need much." A few people laughed. I opened the envelope. A single $20 bill slid into my lap. It wasn't even new. It had a soft crease through the middle and some faded ink in one corner like it had already lived a full life before being selected to humiliate me. Aunt Denise let out a sharp little laugh she tried and failed to swallow. Uncle Vic shook his head and said, "Well, that tracks." My grandmother reached over and patted my hand like I was supposed to be grateful for being understood so perfectly. Tyler leaned back in his chair, twirled the key fob once around his finger and said, "Hey, yours is easier to park." That got the biggest laugh of the night. And the part that still makes me smile now is this. While they were all laughing at the 20 at me, at the role I'd been assigned in that family for years, none of them knew that the house we were sitting in belonged to me on paper. Their missed payments were sitting in a folder on my laptop, and in less than 2 weeks my father would be calling from unknown numbers, voice shaking, asking me not to make him beg. That was the moment I stopped being hurt and started becoming exact. I smiled down at the bill, smoothed it flat with my thumb and said, "You're right, this is unforgettable." My father laughed, relieved, because he thought that smile meant I was swallowing it like I always had. My mother relaxed back into her chair. Tyler clicked the SUV again. The patio lights glowed. The roast on the table steamed. The family performance continued. What none of them understood was that I had just seen the entire structure clearly for the first time. Families like mine survive on story. Not truth story. The story about Tyler was simple and flattering. He was magnetic, restless, big-hearted, a risk-taker, a little messy, sure, but meant for something bigger. Whenever he failed, there was always a noble translation waiting for it. A bad investment meant he was ambitious. A missed payment meant he'd been under pressure. A firing became proof that small-minded people couldn't handle strong personalities. Every wreck came with a weather explanation. Every debt came with a timing explanation. Every mess came with a future in which it would all finally make sense. The story about me was cleaner and meaner. Nora is fine. Nora doesn't need much. Nora is independent. Nora is cold. Nora makes good money. Nora is hard to read. Nora doesn't care about flashy things. Nora can handle herself. It sounded complimentary to outsiders. That was the genius of it. Because underneath all that was the truth they never said out loud. Nora can carry what we drop. I'm 32 and I live in Richmond, Virginia. I work in operations for a regional property management firm, which is a dull way of saying I spend my days preventing people's lives from becoming expensive disasters. I know how deadlines turn into penalties, how missed paperwork turns into legal problems, how bad systems quietly rot until one weak point snaps and takes everything with it. I know what things actually cost. I know what it takes to keep a roof, a business, a payroll, a property, a schedule, a lease, a household from sliding 2 inches off center and collapsing. That should have made my family respect me. Instead, it made me useful. And usefulness in the wrong family gets treated like an endless resource. The first time my father asked me for money, he did it in the language he preferred most, urgency disguised as temporary inconvenience. I was 24, barely stable myself, and he called from the parking lot of a supply warehouse because one of his business accounts had been frozen. He didn't say, "Can you help?" He said, "I'm in a bind," and then let the silence sit there because he knew I'd hate it enough to fill it. I wired the money before lunch. He paid me back slowly, with irritation like my having records was the rude part. After that came the usual small emergencies that were never small. Insurance premiums they forgot until cancellation letters arrived. Property taxes they thought were handled. A payroll gap at the cabinet shop when one client paid late and my father insisted it would only be a few days. A lawyer consult after Tyler signed something idiotic and then ignored the consequences. A refrigerator for my mother after she spent 20 minutes telling me Tyler was already under so much stress that she couldn't possibly ask him. A contractor deposit. A roof patch. A utility issue. Registration fees. Business software my father didn't understand but needed. Little sums, then larger ones, then whole categories of responsibility drifting quietly in my direction because I was the one person in that family who understood that ignoring a thing does not make it cheaper. Nobody ever called it dependence. They called it being the dependable one. My grandmother loved saying that. The dependable child is always the blessed one. That sentence bought them years of my life, and Tyler floated through all of it untouched. He was 31 at the time of that dinner, living in my parents' house again for the third time, talking loudly about restarting his life as if every restart were proof of character instead of evidence of a pattern. He'd cycled through sales jobs, a failed attempt at real estate, 2 online businesses that existed mostly in his own narration, and 1 year of calling himself a consultant because it sounded expensive. He dressed well when he had somewhere to be seen. He could charm strangers in elevators. He could make older women love him and men like my father project themselves onto him. He was exactly the kind of son people mistake for promising long after the returns have become embarrassing, and my father adored him for it. Ron Mercer was a loud man who believed volume could cover weak math. He ran a custom cabinetry business for more than 2 decades and spent at least the last 10 years confusing pride with solvency. He liked being the man at the center of the table. He liked making pronouncements. He liked the version of fatherhood where his generosity was visible and other people's contributions happened quietly in the background where they didn't interfere with the story he preferred about himself. My mother, Celia, was softer but in some ways more dangerous. She didn't usually attack directly. She translated my father's uglier instincts into something that sounded almost reasonable. She could make exploitation feel like duty. She could make your refusal feel like a moral defect. Her favorite trick was to speak in the language of hurt while protecting the person doing the hurting. So when the SUV appeared in the driveway with a giant red bow on top, it wasn't really about Tyler getting a car. It was about symbolism. It was about the family deciding in public what each child was worth, and that part would have been ugly enough on its own. But what made it obscene was that the house we were celebrating in had almost been taken from them 18 months earlier, and I was the reason it hadn't been. That was the truth sitting under the roast, the wineglasses, the laughter, the polished table, the bow in the driveway, the $20 bill in my hand. My parents had refinanced the house twice. The first time my father called it expansion capital for the shop. The second time he called it restructuring. In my family, restructuring meant a pile of bad decisions no one wanted itemized aloud. Tyler's private debts, business slowdowns, late taxes, credit card balances rolled from one place into another. A few months here, a few months there, until the numbers stopped looking like stress and started looking like a countdown. When the notices began arriving, my mother hid them in a kitchen drawer under coupons and batteries, as if paperwork became less real when it sat under a bed bath receipt. My father kept saying he had it handled. Then one Thursday night he called me over because they had some papers, and the tone in his voice finally cracked enough for me to hear what pride had been sitting on top of. That night I saw the file: arrears, late fees, escrow shortage, insurance issues, tax problems, multiple notices. A timeline that ended very clearly with them losing the house. They were weeks from disaster. I should have let them face it. Instead, I did what I always did. I found structure under panic. At the time, my company's owner, Marlene Becker, was offloading a few smaller holdings to rebalance her portfolio. Marlene was the kind of woman who could glance at a file, a person, and a balance sheet and know within minutes which of the three was lying. Over coffee one Saturday, I explained that I knew of a property with equity, distressed owners, and a narrow path to saving it if the transaction was done correctly and quickly. She stared at me for a long moment and said, "If you do this, don't do it like a daughter, do it like an operator." That sentence should have been a warning. I formed Mercer Lane Holdings within 2 weeks. The house was purchased through the LLC in a quiet arrangement that satisfied the debt, halted the foreclosure path, and allowed my parents to remain in the home under a leaseback. Their attorney reviewed it. Priya Shah drafted the final documents. My parents signed. My father later told the family he had reorganized some assets. My mother repeated that line because it let her keep her dignity. Tyler never read a page. Why would he? Reading had never once improved his position in that family. For the next 18 months, I kept their life standing. I managed the lease. I covered shortfalls. I coordinated repairs. I waived late fees they should have paid. I handled county notices, insurance headaches, maintenance emergencies, vendor calls, and reimbursement gaps. When the HVAC died in August, I paid for the replacement because my mother cried over the heat and my father swore reimbursement was coming. It never did. When a roof patch became a larger issue after a storm, I handled that too. When a lien surfaced from an old contractor dispute, I cleared it. When the county permit issue on the deck resurfaced, I took care of it before it became more expensive. When utilities shifted systems, I updated the login and paid through the portal because nobody else was paying attention. At one point, I was effectively running their stability like a quiet second job no one was willing to name. And then I sat at their dinner table while they handed Tyler a car and me $20 as a joke. That was the part that cured me. I went home that night, took off my heels, tied my hair up, opened my laptop, and started pulling receipts. Lease agreement, payment ledger, title records, wire transfers, repair invoices, insurance communications, tax records, vendor emails, screenshots of my mother thanking me for covering this one. Voicemails from my father telling me to just run it through your thing for now. Messages from Tyler asking if I could float them until next week because Dad was in a tight spot and you know how he gets. I built folders, then a timeline, then a packet. At 1:12 in the morning, Tyler texted me, "Hope you didn't take tonight weird. Dad was joking. Also, can you send me your insurance guy? Rates on the SUV are insane." Lol. I stared at that message for a long time. It was so perfectly Tyler that it almost felt scripted. Publicly, I was the uptight sister who couldn't take a joke. Privately, I was still the invisible bridge under his new toy. I didn't answer. The next morning, my mother sent a photo of leftover cake in foil and a heart emoji. My grandmother texted that comparison was the enemy of gratitude. Uncle Vic sent a gif of two siblings wrestling and wrote, "Don't make a federal case out of family teasing." Tyler texted again with a question mark. My father waited until Sunday night to call, and when he did, he didn't apologize. He said, "You still know more about this warranty stuff than the rest of us. Come by this week and help Tyler sort the paperwork." That was it. That was the clarity point. People think revenge begins with anger, but anger is sloppy. Clarity is cleaner. Clarity is where you stop asking for fairness and start measuring leverage. Monday morning, I called Priya. She had drafted the original leaseback agreement, and more importantly, she did not get sentimental around family systems. I told her I was done subsidizing them. She asked whether I wanted to preserve the relationship. I said no so quickly she didn't bother pretending there were softer options. "We do it precisely then," she said. "No emotional gray area. Notice of default, lease violations, payment history, termination language, timeline. You want noise or you want certainty?" "Certainty," I said, then I added, "and timing. Because people like my father always give themselves away. If you wait, they tell you where they plan to stand when they think they're still in control." Sure enough, 3 days later my mother texted the family group chat, "Sunday supper at our place. Let's reset with gratitude and love." Reset meant erase. Reset meant perform normal. Reset meant get Nora back in the room and make her swallow the humiliation as proof the hierarchy still worked. I told Priya to prepare everything. Not just the notice, everything: the formal notice of default, the termination notice, the ledger, the signed leaseback, the title record, the reimbursement log, the maintenance invoices I had covered, documentation of Tyler's unauthorized use of the garage for one of his side hustles, the cover letter, the compliance timeline, every page my father would try to wave away before realizing the signatures were his. And in the days before Sunday dinner, I did the one thing my family had never once planned for. I stopped helping, quietly, completely, no warning. I didn't resend the county portal login when my father asked. I didn't forward my insurance broker's number to Tyler. I didn't answer my mother's text about the kitchen sink doing that thing again. I didn't remind them about the business liability premium due midweek. I didn't message the bookkeeper when payroll looked thin. I didn't smooth, solve, translate, coordinate, or absorb. That was the first stage of the collapse. Tuesday, Tyler texted the group chat complaining the dealership needed updated proof of insurance and Dad had been on hold with morons all morning. Wednesday, my mother texted me privately, "Honey, did you already pay the pest contract? There's an invoice here and I can't tell if it's duplicate. I left it unread." Thursday, my father sent, "Need county login. Thought I had it. Send ASAP." Unread. Friday, Tyler called twice, then texted, "Did you seriously block me over a joke?" Saturday morning, my mother tried guilt. "Nora, I don't know why you're dragging this out. Family dinners are supposed to heal things, not create tension." Saturday afternoon, my father tried authority. "Be at dinner tomorrow. We're done with this nonsense." Saturday night, Tyler tried mockery again because mockery was the only language he knew before panic. "Bring your 20. Maybe we can combine it with my gas money." I didn't answer any of them. By Sunday evening, all 3 of them were irritated, which meant they were exactly where I wanted them. Sunday supper was pot roast, rosemary potatoes, green beans drowned in garlic, and the same polished dining table where the $20 bill had landed in my lap the week before. The SUV still sat in the driveway. No bow now, but still positioned just enough to be seen through the open curtains if someone happened to look. This time it was a smaller audience. My parents, Tyler, my grandmother, Uncle Vic, enough witnesses to matter, not enough to dilute the sound. My father went into host mode the second I walked in, which was always a bad sign. That meant he felt the need to control tone before anybody else could. He kissed the air near my cheek and said, "Glad you decided not to be dramatic." My mother touched my elbow and whispered, "Let's all keep tonight gentle." Tyler lifted his wineglass at me without standing. Uncle Vic gave me that grin older men use when they think they understand a conflict they haven't paid for. I took my seat and set a flat manila envelope beside my plate. Nobody noticed. Dinner began with grace, then little speeches, then fake warmth, my mother thanking God for family, my grandmother talking about humility, Uncle Vic saying every family had one child with charm and one with discipline and that both mattered in different ways. Tyler talking about a weekend trip he wanted to take in the new SUV once the insurance problem got fixed. My father carving meat like a man restoring order with a knife. Then he pushed. He slid a slice of roast onto my plate and said almost casually, "You know, Nora, it would really help your mother if you stopped punishing her over a joke. You've always had a tendency to make things heavier than they are." That was the invitation. Deny it, smile, swallow, return to function. I set my fork down. "No," I said. The room went still. My father gave a small smile, patronizing and confused. No, I repeated. "I'm not punishing Mom over a joke, and this isn't heaviness, it's paperwork. Then I picked up the manila envelope and slid it across the table to him. He frowned. What is this? Your notice. He looked at me, then at the envelope. My what? Eviction notice. No one moved. Tyler let out a laugh that came too fast. Okay, come on. My father opened the packet. He unfolded the first page, read 3 lines, and I watched the blood leave his face in stages. First the annoyance, then the confusion, then that tiny pause people have when the room they thought they were standing in changes around them and they're trying not to let anyone see it happen. What the hell is this? He asked. The formal notice of default and termination of tenancy, I said. Attached are the lease, payment history, title summary, reimbursement ledger, and property records. My mother stared at me. Nora, what are you talking about? I kept my voice even. I'm saying the house belongs to Mercer Lane Holdings. I'm Mercer Lane Holdings. I'm saying I stopped the foreclosure, bought the property through the LLC, leased it back to you, and covered enough of your obligations to keep this place standing for a year and a half. I'm saying I'm done. Uncle Vic actually muttered, no. Tyler grabbed the packet out of my father's hand like speed could save him. This is crazy, he said. You don't own this house. Page 4, I said. He didn't want page 4, he wanted noise. My mother turned to my father. Ron, he didn't answer. That silence was one of the most satisfying things I have ever heard. Because that was the moment she knew, not the full story, not all the numbers, but enough to understand that the version of reality she'd been living in had been padded by my labor and hidden from her by my father's ego. My father found his voice and went straight to denial. You helped with paperwork, that's all, don't start pretending. No, I said, I prevented the county sale, you signed a lease back, Priya made sure your attorney reviewed it, the signatures are yours. Tyler flipped pages faster now, his face tightening. Dad, my father ignored him, you can't do this over hurt feelings. It's not over hurt feelings. Then what is it, money? No, I said. Over repeated breach, unpaid obligations, and the fact that you publicly humiliated the person quietly holding your life together. My grandmother finally found her voice. Nora, family does not weaponize help. I turned to her. No, family also doesn't put a bow on one child's car and hand the other child $20 in a house that second child saved. Nobody had a response ready for that. My mother's eyes filled. Why would you do this at dinner? I looked at her for a moment. Because dinner was where you did your part. That one landed hard. My father slammed the papers onto the table. We are not being thrown out of our own home by our daughter. Legally, I said, you're being noticed. What happens after that depends on whether you cooperate. Tyler stood up so fast his chair scraped. This is insane. You've always been jealous since we were kids. I looked at him, then at the key fob sitting beside his plate. Jealous of what, Tyler? I asked. Being 31 and needing Dad to fix your insurance, living on borrowed narratives, calling me at 1 a.m. for my broker's number after laughing while they handed me $20. His mouth opened, nothing came out. My father tried a different angle. We are your parents, you were supposed to help. There it was, the cleanest truth in the room. You still don't hear yourself, I said. That's the problem, not thank you, not we were wrong, supposed to help. You thought competence erased my right to dignity. My mother whispered, we never meant. I stopped her with one look. Please don't insult me by saying you never meant it, I said. Dad staged it, you watched it, Tyler enjoyed it, everybody at this table laughed. You meant every second you were comfortable enough to enjoy. That shut the room down. Then my father did what men like him always do when they're cornered by facts. He reduced everything to a number. How much do you want? I almost smiled. It's not for sale. You smug little Ron, my mother said sharply, but too late. He pointed at me with a shaking hand. After everything we did for you, I cut him off. Would you like me to list it? Then I did, calmly, one item at a time, no raised voice, no shaking hands, no dramatic pauses, the missed lease payments, the reimbursement failures, the HVAC, the roof patch, the lien, the permit issue, the insurance increase I negotiated down, the utility portal I managed. Garage Tyler had used without authorization. The texts, the calls, the voicemails, the exact date of the foreclosure halt, the exact amount I had prevented from becoming a public sale, the exact number of times my father said he'd handle it next week. With every fact, the room changed. Uncle Vic stopped performing, my grandmother went pale, Tyler sat back down, my mother cried harder but quieter, my father tried interruption, then anger, then guilt, then authority, then disbelief. Nothing worked, facts do not get intimidated. When I finished, the room was so quiet I could hear the little tapping noise of the patio bulbs outside knocking against each other in the wind. I stood. The notice gives you the period required under the lease and under state law. Priya's number is in the cover letter. If you want to cooperate and avoid formal filing, do it. If you want to make this uglier, I'm prepared for that too. My mother reached toward me. Nora, please. I moved my arm before she could touch me. We are past please, I said, and that was when my father finally broke enough to sound human, not soft, not sorry, just scared. You can't do this, he said, and for the first time in my entire life he didn't sound angry when he said it. He sounded lost. You can't. I picked up my bag. I already did. I made it to the front door before he said the thing men like him always say when power leaves before they can approve the exit. You'll regret this, I turned back once. No, I said, you're just finally going to feel it. Then I left. The first stage of the collapse after that was annoyance. Tyler texted first, you embarrassed Dad, fix this before it gets worse. Then my mother, please don't do this in writing, we can settle it privately. Then my father, call me. That was day 1. Day 2 was irritation turning into confusion. The county portal still wasn't fixed. The insurance issue on Tyler's SUV still wasn't resolved. The pest contract had lapsed. A plumbing problem in the kitchen had gone from that thing again to standing water under the sink. One of my father's shop policies had not been renewed correctly because the broker needed documentation he had assumed I was already handling. Tyler texted, "What exactly did you stop paying?" That line made me laugh, not because it was funny. Because he still thought the damage was about one payment instead of an entire hidden system. Day 3 was urgency. My mother, Nora, the water bill says final notice, and I know that sounds impossible, but please call me. My father, need county login immediately. Tyler, registration issue now too. Did you tell them something? I answered none of it. Day 4 was pressure. My father called 6 times, then from an unknown number, then left a voicemail trying to sound firm and failing. Nora, this has gone far enough. Call me tonight. Do not ignore me in this tone. In this tone. Even then he thought tone was the emergency. Day 5 was panic. My mother left me a voicemail from what sounded like a bathroom, voice lowered so no one else would hear her unraveling. I know you're angry, but your father doesn't understand these systems and Tyler keeps saying he'll figure things out and he isn't, and the sink is backed up and I don't know what is happening with the insurance and they're saying things I don't understand and I just need you to call me and explain what to do. That one sat with me for a while, not because it changed anything, because it was the first honest thing I'd heard from her in years. I didn't call back. Day 6 was the first time my father begged. Not asked, not negotiated, begged. He called from a number I didn't know and I answered because I thought it was work. Nora, his voice was rough, smaller, closed-door rough, the voice of a man who had finally run out of people to shout at. I said nothing. He swallowed hard enough that I heard it. I need you to listen to me. Still nothing. We made mistakes. That almost would have meant something if he'd learned how not to make himself the center of every sentence. I let the silence stretch. Rushed into it. You proved your point, okay? Fine, you proved it. Your mother can't sleep. Tyler's insurance is a mess. The business is getting squeezed because things got dropped and now everybody's acting like I should know what you were handling and I didn't know you were handling all of it because you never said. He stopped. That was the sentence, not because it was an apology, because it was the closest he had ever come to admitting the scale of my labor. You never said, as if not bragging was the crime. We need more time, he said finally, and the last word frayed a little. Please. There it was, please. The same man who had stood at the head of the table grinning while they handed me $20 was now asking me not to let him drown in the consequences of not knowing how his own life worked. You have the time stated in the notice, I said. Nora, be reasonable. I was reasonable for 18 months. You know I can't start over at my age. I almost gave him the line he deserved. I almost told him maybe he should have thought about age before turning his daughter into a punchline in a house she saved. Instead, I said something better. I learned reason from necessity. You mistook it for obedience. Then I hung up. The second stage of the collapse was public. One of my father's commercial clients paused new work until proof of coverage was restored. Tyler had to leave the SUV sitting in the driveway for 2 days because registration paperwork had tangled with the insurance issue and nobody could explain the mismatch without involving facts they didn't want to say out loud. The kitchen plumbing problem got worse and cost more. Payroll at the shop tightened enough that the bookkeeper started asking questions instead of covering. My mother, still assuming some part of me was probably handling things anyway, missed another notice. The garage had to be cleared, which killed Tyler's latest little side hustle because he no longer had a free place to stage inventory. That was when the tone changed in the messages. Arrogant, then annoyed, then confused, then urgent, then humiliated. My mother, I am asking you as your mother, please call me. Tyler, I didn't know it was all you. My father, don't make me say this twice. Then several hours later, I am asking you to help us. Then later still, please. A week after the dinner, my mother convinced me to one meeting on one condition. Priya would be there. That was generous of me. More generous than they deserved. They came to Priya's office looking diminished in small, unflattering ways. My father's shirt collar was wrinkled. Tyler had chosen a button-down he thought made him look serious, but all it really did was make him look like a boy wearing consequences for the first time. My mother looked tired around the mouth, not transformed. Just emptied out a little. Priya laid out the options in a voice so calm it bordered on cruel. Cooperate and vacate voluntarily, negotiate a brief extension with strict terms, contest it and lose publicly. My father tried one final performance. This is a family matter. Priya didn't even blink. No, this is a property matter complicated by years of informal dependency. My client has extensive documentation. Familial language does not alter the title record. That took something out of him. Tyler tried guilt. You're really going to put mom through this? I looked at him and said, you still think this is happening to her. That's why you're 31 and surprised by paperwork. He went silent. My mother cried, not dramatically this time, quietly. I didn't know it was all on you. I met her eyes. I know. That was the whole tragedy right there. She hadn't known because she had never really wanted to. Knowing would have required changing the system while it still benefited her. My father sat with his hands clasped so hard the knuckles went white. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, smaller too. Then he did something I honestly hadn't expected. He looked at me and said, I'm asking you not to do this. Not roaring, not declaring, not ordering, asking. I kept my face still. I'm not doing this to you, I said. I'm stopping what I did for you. That line landed harder than anything else in the room because that was the truth. They signed the vacate agreement. My father didn't look at me while he signed. Tyler did, but only in quick flashes, like eye contact itself had become dangerous. My mother whispered, "I'm sorry," and I believed that she felt sorry. I just no longer thought feeling sorry was a form of repair. They moved out within the negotiated window. Tyler got an apartment he couldn't really afford, which meant somebody else probably tied themselves to it with paperwork they would later regret. My parents rented a smaller place across town. My father's business shrank in the ordinary, humiliating way businesses shrink when the person running them mistakes personality for process. My mother got quieter. My grandmother called twice about forgiveness and sounded uncertain both times, like even she had realized her old sayings didn't survive contact with a title record and a ledger. 6 months later, I sold the house. A young couple bought it. They stood in the empty dining room where the $20 bill had fallen into my lap and talked softly about paint colors, a nursery, and whether they wanted a long table near the windows. I listened to them discuss a future in that room without humiliation in it, and something about that felt cleaner than revenge. I paid off the rest of my condo. I padded my savings. I took a trip to Maine. I slept. I stopped checking my phone with that old reflexive dread. I stopped bracing for guilt disguised as concern. I stopped being available as a system. That was the part nobody in my family understood. The notice wasn't the victory. The silence after was. The mornings that belonged only to me, the money that stayed where I earned it, the weekends no longer hijacked by small favors. The absence of urgency, the absence of performance, the absence of being needed only when something was breaking. People always want the revenge scene, and I understand why. The dinner, the envelope, my father reading the notice with everyone watching. Tyler finally having no clever line, the messages turning from smug to desperate. The begging, it was satisfying. It should have been, but the colder truth is better than satisfaction. Some families do not love you as a person. They love the access they have to your competence. They love the labor, the rescue, the stability, the calm, the way you make their chaos survivable. And the moment you stop performing that function, they call you cruel, because cruelty is what dependence feels like when it loses its favorite target. My parents handed my brother a car and gave me $20 because they thought they had already priced me correctly. What they found out too late was that I was never the cheap child. I was the cost of the whole house.